Now our next guest is a guy that doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give him an introduction anyway. It's Mike Callicrate from Colorado, Kansas. He's all over. He flies the country. When I think of Mike, I think of how young he looks. And I think that it's just that entrepreneurial drive. I'm going to let him tell his story, but just the fact that we kind of almost started out the same. We were young guys that went to college, wanted to build a feedlot, raise a family, and live a happy life. And things changed for him when he started speaking up. So, I mean, if you want to talk about a retribution, this is a guy that's met retribution, stood back against it, and he just practically a military man, adapt and overcome. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mike Callicrate.
Thanks, Brett. That was nice. Thank you. Hello. Glad to be here. Thanks, Brett, for that introduction. It was 1999, I think, when I decided to sell meat instead of livestock. I'd been blackballed by the big packers. I sued them in 1996 along with Herman and Staten and Sam Britt and the whole list. There was several of us that teamed up to go against IBP in particular. And so by 1999, they'd had enough of me. And in that December, I was informed that they wouldn't be buying my cattle anymore. And I was already down to just one last packer, National Beef. So I had 14,000 cattle in a 12,000 head feedlot, still coming in, couldn't sell them. It was a mess. Called up Dan Glickman. I said, what am I going to do? Why don't you just enforce the Packers and Stockyards Act? And Glickman says, well, you know, Mike, in this modern day of globalization, we need big meat packers that can do business globally. We need big companies that can do business globally. So isn't that what we're up against right now? I mean, listen to Claire Calloway's talk. It's totally what we're up against. And it's not just big meat packers, it's big retailers, it's big food service companies, it's big food management companies. How do we access the market? And so what I really want to discuss today is as we've worked to build this alternative pathway to the consumer through like companies like Ranch Foods Direct, who's now been around for 23 years, it's getting harder and harder for us to do business. They keep blocking our pathway to the marketplace. Claire Calloway mentioned, and AJ mentioned White Oak Pastures just losing Whole Foods. I mean, they sold the first pound of grass-fed beef to Whole Foods 20-some years ago, and now they're out and they have no market with Whole Foods. In fact, we will pretty well agree between myself, Greg Gunthorpe, and Will Harris, who all have on-farm slaughter processing, that the wholesale markets is over. And so I get excited when I heard AJ yesterday. I just met him and enjoyed a visit with him about how he's trying to develop better connections to the consumer. But the one thing that is true about every small plant that we build in building this alternative food system infrastructure that the Biden administration is talking about, the local regional food system development, is we have to be able to sell the whole animal. If we can't sell the whole animal, we eventually go broke, right, Max? Amen. You gotta sell ground beef. You gotta sell the trim. And so here is where we're really coming up against it. And I hope Senator Rounds, is he still in the room? Man, he gives me some hope. I hope we can really think about where these imports are coming from, how they're produced, and what advantage we're given to these big importers. And so imports and deception threaten the new local regional meat system and food system development. Rather than supporting our own U.S. cattle producers and local regional meat plants, beef from other countries is receiving preference from USDA and big food companies. Below cost of production, imported beef is blended with cheap fat from overfed cattle and lean, finely textured beef, also known as pink slime. A low-cost ammonia-washed byproduct of box beef is added at around 10 to 12% final weight. Well, what impact does that have? Well, if I'm a small plant trying to sell ground beef and my break even on ground beef is $5, what's this stuff doing to us? The blended product appears as product of the USA, even though it's from Brazil and up to 22 other countries. On the packaging of food service companies and processors selling to big box retailers, restaurants, institutions, including fast food, retirement homes, schools, hospitals, food banks, etc., below $2.50 a pound. It's roughly half the cost of the higher quality domestically produced ground beef from local regional plants, leaving the small plants, which the Biden administration claims to support, to go broke, drowning in their beef trim. 22 countries are eligible to export beef to the U.S., the most profitable consuming market in the world. We've always talked about, from the day RCAF started, the best consuming, most profitable, highest priced consuming market is in the United States. So why can't we get access to it? Why can't us as cattle producers sell our animals in this most profitable, highest consuming market, and we're worrying about exporting? The market is here. How do we get access to it? Foreign beef is sourced and imported at below cost of production prices. Well, that's contrary to trade. That's contrary to the rules that are in place currently. Upon processing and repackaging, it should say and/or repackaging. You don't even really have to process it, just repackage it. Foreign beef can be sold as product to the USA. Ground beef blends, if it's pink, it's meat, with imported meat are roughly half the cost of high-quality domestic product. How many of you have heard of Bob Peterson? Isn't that interesting? There's a whole generation. There's a whole generation that hasn't heard of Bob Peterson. He was the CEO and president of IBP. And there was a guy that came to him, I suppose, late 70s maybe? And this story was related to me by Hughes Bagley. Hughes Bagley was an executive vice president at IBP, came to IBP as a retail expert in selling meat. And Hughes got crossways with IBP when he retired and sued him. And we had the lawsuit against IBP at the same time. So Hughes and I got to be friends as plaintiffs in suits against IBP. And he was telling me this story about Eldon Roth with Beef Products Incorporated. This guy from Sioux City, Iowa, that went to Bob Peterson. He said, Bob, I've got some really, really cool technology, some cool equipment. Guy's got lots of patents on this stuff. And we've come to know his business as a producer of advanced meat technology. The advanced meat technology, where he takes the bones, like the neck bones, the spinal column, and all of that, and he's got a process where he takes the meat off of those bones. Hydrology, high pressure, this and that. But he's got this other thing he does where he takes the outside fat of the animal where the potential pathogens and contamination is, and he puts it through a process where we turn it into an edible product, which was inedible before because of many pathogen problems. It has now become an edible product. And so he goes to Bob Peterson. He says, Bob, I want to sell you this equipment. And Bob says, no, we aren't interested in buying the equipment, but we'll certainly sell you our bones. Well, his name, Eldon Roth, lives in Buffalo. Isn't it Buffalo Dunes there in Dakota Dunes, lives in Dakota Dunes. It wasn't long that Eldon Roth had a bigger house than Bob Peterson in Dakota Dunes. Anyway, the guy becomes the wealthiest man in the beef industry by basically taking a byproduct that previously wasn't edible and is now incorporated into ground beef. So listen to this.
News investigation. A whistleblower has come forward to tell consumers about the ground beef a lot of us buy at the supermarket. Is it what we think it is, or is it padded with a filler the whistleblower calls pink slime? ABC's senior national correspondent Jim Avila set out to get answers.
Gerald Zernstein grinds his own hamburger these days. Why? Because this former USDA scientist, now whistleblower, knows that 70% of the ground beef we buy at the supermarket contains something he calls pink slime. Beef trimmings that were once used only in dog food and cooking oil, now sprayed with ammonia to make them safe to eat, and then added to most ground beef as a cheaper filler. It was Zernstein who, in a USDA memo, first coined the term pink slime, and is now coming forward to say he won't buy it.
It's economic fraud. It's not fresh ground beef. It's a substitute. It's a cheap substitute being added in.
Zernstein and his fellow USDA scientist Carl Custer both warned against using what the industry calls lean, finely textured beef and is widely known now as pink slime. But their government bosses overruled them.
Why didn't you consider it beef?
Because it was a salvage product.
Leftovers?
Fat that had been heated at low temperature and the excess fat spun out.
Here's how it's done. Those waste trimmings are gathered, simmered at low heat to make it easier to separate fat from muscle, put in a centrifuge and spun to finish the separation. Next, the mixture is sent through pipes where it's sprayed with ammonia gas to kill bacteria, and finally compressed into bricks and flash frozen for shipment to meat packers and grocery stores where it's added to most ground beef. And it doesn't have to appear on the label because over objections of its own scientists, USDA officials with links to the beef industry labeled pink slime meat.
The undersecretary said, it's pink, therefore it's meat.
ABC News has learned the woman who made the decision to okay the mix is former Undersecretary of Agriculture Joanne Smith, a call that led to hundreds of millions of dollars for Beef Products, Inc., the makers of pink slime. When Smith stepped down from USDA, BPI's principal supplier appointed her to the board of directors, where she made at least $1.2 million over 17 years. She did not return our calls for comment. BPI says it had nothing to do with her appointment, and the USDA says, while legal then, under current ethics rules, she could not have immediately joined that board. Jim Avila, ABC News, Washington.
And we know this raises so many questions. Jim Avila is going to stay on this case. And coming up...
So Jim Avila really didn't stay on the case because BPI sued ABC News for defamation, libel, slander, whatever you want, and they ended up settling the case, even though that report is 100% truthful. The day journalism died. So this is what's in your meat. They were in 70% of the ground beef prior to this ABC News report, so now they're back. They're back, and they've got a settlement from ABC News that we don't know. It was sealed, so it was a lot of money, and so Eldon Roth is interesting. He ends up getting involved with National Beef and the buyout of National Beef from Farmland Industries. He's instrumental in the sale of National Beef to Marfrig, the Brazilian company. This guy is amazing. And he's smart, and he's no doubt done some things that might be helpful I'm trying to think just a minute what they might be. But the guy is smart. And he's an inventor, and you got to appreciate people that have that kind of ingenuity. But this is the new company. You know, BPI didn't look great after ABC News, and the report came out, and the whole pink slime thing. Remember the San Antonio mom that started the petition to get pink slime out of school lunch? And in Food Inc. had the full tour of the plant and showed the anhydrous ammonia being sprayed into the trim, and I mean, it was really bad for Beef Products Incorporated. So now here we come back. We've got some money from ABC News, and we start Empirical Foods, and they just built a brand new plant in Garden City, Kansas, with conveyors coming out of the slaughter plants into the processing plant there. And the thing that they've added now, and remember they were in 70% before of the ground beef. How much is it today when they're private labeling? So say Cisco wants their own private label ground beef, kind of like Simple Truth with Kroger, or perhaps it's the private label for Whole Foods. You know, they've all got these private labels going now. So now Empirical Foods is going to take that trim that's coming in, the foreign trim that's coming in at around $2 a pound. They're going to take the extra fat from IBP or any of the big packers, which is really cheap. That's going to get blended in, and then about 10 to 12% of the mix they're going to put in the pink slime. But now it's got your name on the box. They can private label for you. So you basically buy the product from Empirical Foods and you put it into distribution. And so it's in the old folks' homes, it's in the hospitals, it's in the schools, and it's in every supermarket across the country. And people like us that are trying to build these local regional food systems now have $2.50 ground beef to compete with. And so this is just the price list that you're going to see from one of the food service companies. And you can see it's circled, $2.46. And you got to know they're making a lot of money at $2.46. And we're losing a lot of money if we had to compete with that. But you can see the average prices for the other products on there, anywhere from $7.28 for the Wagyu blend, which our product would be at Ranch Foods Direct with our Angus Wagyu cross, down to $4.73 a pound would be about the cheapest on there. But like my friend that sent me this list said, and this guy buys for or works, he's a nutritionist at retirement homes. He says, here's some pricing on ground beef. Facilities typically go with the cheapest option, but they don't know it's not domestically produced. They don't know there's pink slime in this product because it doesn't have to be labeled. And so he said he highlighted just a few that are commonly purchased, and those are the ones in yellow, and I circled the one at $2.46 a pound, which is the product we're talking about. I think we've got to get pink slime labeled again, LFTB, whatever you want to call it, on the box. It should never have been taken off. It used to be labeled. Joanne Smith came in, said if it's pink, it's meat. We're not going to label it. How healthy is it to put anhydrous ammonia, introduce that into your human gut microbiome? If it kills pathogens on the meat, which is all it's intended to really do, what does that do for the human health of people who consume that? What do the gastroenterologists think about this? Let's ask them. We need to know. And some are thinking, wait, this is when all these stomach issues, digestive issues showed up, particularly in young people, young kids that are eating school lunch that has got this product in it. So I want to see pink slime, lean, finely textured beef labeled on the box that it comes in. I'd like to see it eliminated, actually. But I also want to know, was it imported? So this is how they're driving small plants out of business. And I was speaking with Claire Culloway here a while back, and we were just talking about the difficulty of market access. And I honestly cannot tell you of a plant, a small plant, many of them built since COVID with government money, that's having any fun. They're on the ropes. They're fighting for survival. South 40 went out of business in South Dakota, or was that North Dakota? North Dakota. We've got the Marfa plant in Texas that's now gone. They put a lot of money into a modular kind of a slaughter and processing facility down there. I talked to a lot of them. We took a trip up through Wyoming into Montana a few weeks ago. Nobody's having any fun. And so what can we do about it? We've got to get out of the box. The box beef is a huge mistake. If you go to my blog at mycallicrate.com and just put in box beef or getting out of the box, you can read about it. We don't have time to talk about that today, but I can tell you that it's the small plants like mine that stayed operating during COVID and never weakened. We've got room to expand production. The big guys are always running at 100% because they want the return on equity, return on investment. But the small plants have resiliency. They can kick it up. They can do more if needed, and we did. There were times during COVID when we actually tripled our business, tripled the amount of product that we were producing through our cut room, and USDA refused to give us extra hours. USDA is not our friend in this project, not our friend. They are a fully captured organization and agency, and they are not our friend. And I hate to talk a bit against Zach Ducheneau, but they're not doing the job. They are representing industrial agriculture and big corporations over ranchers and small meat plants. President Biden came out with this executive order, and here's my message to him from a while back. Without fair market access and following reforms, pouring resources into new and existing food processing and distribution infrastructure is a waste of time and money. We must first strengthen antitrust law enforcement and break up the monopoly power. We have to break up the monopoly power. We have to get truth in labeling. Stop the food fraud. Thank you, Senator Rounds. Eliminate false, misleading, and deceptive marketing. USDA is the biggest violator of all with the product of the USA label. Finally, I guess, Vilsack's coming around. We don't need it, Congress. We don't need new laws. We just need to stop the fraudulent and misleading labeling. And he has full authority to do that right now. Meat inspection. One of the major barriers today for small plants is getting meat inspection. It shouldn't be confrontational. It should be cooperative to produce safe food. And why at the same time that you put 3 meat inspectors in Greg Gunthorpe's small hog plant in LaGrange, Indiana, you're pulling the inspectors out of the biggest plants and letting them self-inspect. Greg's got 3 inspectors a day coming into a small hog plant that might do 100 head, harassing the hell out of him, and JBS, the Batista brothers, are going self-inspected? This is what's happening. Why doesn't the government favor, and this should be in law, why doesn't the government favor small plants in their purchasing? So Hillary Cole, after Biden came in, Hillary Cole worked with USDA. She was so excited about the possibility of purchasing meat, and it was her responsibility. She was over purchasing, buying from these new local regional plants that USDA is investing money in, and we've proven during COVID that they're more reliable, better, and they build communities. And she was excited about that. Well, guess what? She got moved out. And now I've got a guy that won't even return my calls. I've got a guy that won't even respond to an email about purchasing from local plants first. We need priority. We need Will Harris. They should buy every pound of ground beef his plant can possibly produce, and not below his cost of production. Thank you.